Hey, Lisa, just in terms of format, Andy's asked us to, rather than do individual talks on demonetization of news and the verification scenario, we're going to run this as a discussion, and I really look forward to doing that with you. So much has been said and written about the demonetization of news, and we as an industry, but also GroupM has made it a real focus on trying to get behind a campaign to not just raise awareness around the demonetization of news, but to try and put into place real action to get some of that money flowing back into news organizations that need the revenue right now. There's something called the Local Media Consortium, where we have 3,000 or more local news organizations, where we've put those URLs into the programmatic supply chain. SSPs like Triple Lift have added 400 names of news organizations that we've added to the supply chain. There's Digital Content Next that have been doing this for a while, all trying to promote more action-orientated remonetization of news. And in fact, on top of that, we're looking at globally through an organization called the Worldwide Association of Newspapers, is to build lists of local newspapers, probably more than 10,000 local newspapers, where we're going to be adding all those to the programmatic supply chain. So this is not just rhetoric, it's not just dialogue, but we're trying to remonetize this so that we can make sure that as many of the newspapers, and particularly the local newspapers, survive the COVID crisis. So hopefully that's going to make a tangible difference to what's happening. But as part of this dialogue, as part of this process, verification companies have come under the spotlight because a lot of the critics have said, hey, hang on a minute, you're using crude technology, basic technology. You're using a blunt instrument to demonetize your news because you're using keyword avoidance like COVID or whatever it is. Is that a fair assessment? How would you respond to those critics?
Hi, John. Thanks. It's great to be talking with you today. And we've talked a couple of times during the COVID virus and this unusual situation that we're in right now. And what we've seen at IAS, so as you're fully aware, because GroupM's an important partner for us, but IAS, we're a third-party global verification company. And since the start of COVID in particular, we've been guiding marketers, agencies, holding companies through this experience, and guiding them both in terms of their brand safety, brand suitability strategies, and the type of precise technology that we offer. And as we've discussed before at IAS, we would never advise a marketer to completely block news. The technology that is available for marketers today, it's incredibly sophisticated. It's backed by machine learning and AI. At IAS, we acquired a contextual intelligence technology company last fall called Admantix. We've completely integrated that tech, and we've now rolled it out, which provides both semantic analysis and sentiment analysis. And so what I mean by that is that marketers can get much more precise about the type of content that they're comfortable, their brand's running next to, and the type of content that they're not comfortable running next to. And a good example of that is things like coming out with segments like infectious diseases, so they can be super precise with the type of content. And I have to say that from the start of the virus, we took a look at data recently in terms of the volume of keyword blocking around terms like coronavirus, COVID, at about mid-March to the first week of May. And in the US, we've seen an 80% decrease in keyword blocking of those specific keywords, the volume of blocking. And in the UK, we've seen a 77% decrease. So the good news is that the more we can all collectively educate marketers in terms of, you know, how they can navigate COVID-like content, or just content that they're more comfortable running next to, less comfortable running next to, I definitely think we'll see a lot less of the keyword blocking that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, so I think you're right. This whole, firstly, all of the awareness that has been created by the numerous news articles and things, you know, sort of virtual appearances by people like you and me has increased the awareness of that, which has helped with education. But it's clear that active education in terms of what the agencies are doing with their clients, what the verification companies need to do with their clients in terms of showing them not to use semantic keyword avoidance as a blunt tool is critically important. In February, when this started to happen, just to support your point, what we did was we created a webinar and a presentation to say, this is the right way to do this. And when we did some research, our team did a research of 80 of our largest clients. And what those clients came back is that 92% of them are now either not blocking news at all, or if they're using any form of keyword avoidance, they're doing it in a sophisticated way by combining the really grim news with something like COVID avoidance, like maybe COVID avoidance and death toll or refrigerator trucks or miracle cure or anything like that. And so I think that's a really, it's a good indication. And hopefully, I spoke to a journalist a couple of days ago and they said, have we seen any flow into any more monetization of news from that? And I think it's probably a little bit early to tell, but it's certainly the conversation that is generated and the dialogue and controversy it's generated seems to have taken us in the right kind of in the right direction.
Right. The other thing that I'll add, actually two things, is, you know, as we're all living through this and partnering with the marketers, the ad agencies, and also the platforms, everyone's getting better educated very quickly. And the marketers who didn't have a brand safety, brand suitability strategy before the virus, they have now quickly defined what that strategy looks like. But another data point that I wanted to share, because we get access to a lot of data, we see a lot of data every day at IAS, is that prior to COVID hitting, the #1 blocked keyword term was Trump. And then once COVID hit, the #1 term became COVID, coronavirus. But what's interesting is it was statistically insignificant, the actual increase we saw in over keyword blocking. So we haven't seen this dramatic shift and increase of keyword blocking. And like I said before, the good news is that over the past few weeks, we've definitely seen a decrease and marketers becoming more comfortable running their brands adjacent to COVID content, COVID-related news. And the other thing that we're seeing is we're definitely seeing a shift from more of the negative type of news. So for example, you know, brands are typically reluctant to run advertising next to something like death toll. But we're also seeing a shift in more positive news related to COVID. You know, same things like the hero stories, articles about healthcare workers, about corporations stepping up, doing more philanthropic activities. And I think as this virus evolves, that we'll see more and more of these hero-like stories and marketers leaning in and being much more comfortable running their brands next to this type of content.
So that's obviously the right direction. And as we move forward, as we move past all of this, hopefully the kind of semantic keyword blocking and using the brand safety as a risk avoidance tool fades into the background, and we can start assuming that things are going to be much safer. And I get the sense that at this time, obviously the focus is avoiding risks for brands. But as we move into the future, are you looking towards at brand suitability rather than risk avoidance, and how to use your technology to create more effectiveness in advertising rather than reduce risk? In other words, brand safety shouldn't become as much of an issue. It should be a price of entry for publishers in maybe a year or 2 years' time, and now to use your kind of semantic technology to find the most suitable and most effective way to find the right kind of content for advertisers to advertise against.
Right, that's exactly right. And it's adding that additional layer, both the semantic analysis and also the sentiment analysis, and the sentiment of the content on the page. The other thing that we'll add that IAS has been investing in during COVID is investing in thought leadership research papers that we've been sharing out to the broader digital community. And we just came out with our second research paper that talks about consumers and their willingness or engagement level in terms of the types of content that they're comfortable reading, COVID-related content, and advertising adjacent to that content, and their engagement level with those types of ads based on different verticals. So, for example, consumers are much more open to seeing ads from healthcare verticals or education, and a lot less engaged with verticals like travel. And that's something that the publishers, they've really been leaning in. We've received unsolicited thank yous from many of the publishers saying, IAS, continue to share this important thought leadership so that we can all get better educated on consumers' engagement levels and perception of the type of advertising that they'd be more engaged with, even though it's running adjacent to COVID news.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've become so sensitive to controversial information, particularly if you go back to the beginning of where sort of brand safety became a practice in 2017, that there's been a sort of a deep concern about appearing next to anything controversial or perhaps even bad news. But your research, combined with other research that we've seen around the world, in fact says that consumers in the main don't perceive a brand in any negative way if they appear next to controversial news. And then sometimes the harder the news, the better, because there's a longer dwell time. And let's get back to the press environment. If you're advertising in newspapers, very often the trust in that newspaper and the amount of time you spend with the newspaper is far greater than perhaps if you'd seen that news in a social network environment. So it's kind of interesting, and I'm really hoping that brands get less sensitive to the controversial news and see the value that you can get from news publications and advertising in not necessarily always against controversial news, but not shying away from controversial news.
That's right. And then I also think, and we've talked about this before too, the fact that during the virus, a lot of the marketers hit the pause button, reworked their messaging, have come out with much more empathetic messaging. And I think that's also helping with that engagement with the brand as consumers get more educated about coronavirus, and they're also engaging with more empathetic messaging from the brands. And again, it's a journey for all of us together, and we're in it together. And however we can help both the marketers, agencies, and platforms and publishers navigate this unprecedented situation, we're more than happy to do so.
Yeah, and I mean, perhaps to conclude, if there's something bright that can come out of the COVID and the demonetization of news, is this huge amount of awareness of the value that news organizations can provide. We need news, and I would say even more local news and news organizations to have more journalists with feet on the ground in communities so that they can report reliable news and give people the information that they need and want at times like this. And the one thing that this has all done is provide that kind of awareness of how important newspapers are and the kind of peril that they're in. And hopefully if we can switch this around and start remonetizing those organizations after COVID has ended, there'll be more momentum to show advertisers how news organizations can add value to their media schedules and to their marketing. So it's been an interesting discussion, a short one, but thanks a ton, Lisa. It really has been fun.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side of this.